Hello and welcome to Both and, a podcast for every episode is an honest attempt to think well about life's biggest questions. We bring together psychology, philosophy, and lived experience so we can deepen our understanding of what it means to learn and listen together. Because everyone deserves to be heard, and all of us belong here together. Today, I have with me Madison Morrigan. Hello, Madison.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here and so happy that you're doing this.
Me too. I couldn't be more jazzed. I have a couple moments in my life written in my diaries where I was highly caffeinated and like channeling a lot of exciting information that was just like finally coming to make sense for me around these topics specifically, both and in my deconstruction process and in a lot of important revelations in my life. So I'm excited to be here with you specifically because I can't remember the year exactly, but I know that you released a podcast. It was epic, called Everything Belongs. And that was for me one of the beginning areas of my life where I was beginning to contemplate the idea that everything and every part of us may actually belong. I would love to hear you talk about where that concept came from for you.
Yeah. I think really what you described is exactly where it came from, which was like really doing my own shadow work, if you will, parts work, INFS work, where I was becoming really aware of how many parts of self I had exiled. And as you maybe you know, and your listeners might know, like the more we do that work with ourselves, the more we see how it's happening familially, systemically, and the more my journey became like less about fixing myself and more about wholeness and accepting all parts of myself. And then also, like, what does that look like in relationship? What does that look like in tumultuous time? I started that podcast in 2020. And so my communities were really divided at that time. They've only gotten honestly more divided since then. And I really studied the middle path, the path of wholeness. And yeah, uh, I think it means everything kind of has to belong because it does. It's here.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. It's like, it does.
It does because it's here. And so how will we relate to it given that it's here? And so it was interesting whenever I launched that name, a couple people were like kind of offended that I was like condoning things. And so it's been interesting. I've taken a break in the podcast, which my break turned into like a very long pause. It's been almost 2 years. Um, but it was interesting to see how people reacted to the name as if I was condoning things that were never even mentioned on the show, simply by saying that they belong or they exist. And so I think it also really piqued a lot of curiosity around abolition work for me, which I'm also really passionate about. It isn't what I do day to day, but it's something that definitely informed that. And then, as you know, people on the internet give feedback, and it just continues my contemplations about like, how are things coming across and what is people's experience of this? And yeah, I'm imagining both ends going to have a similar feeling to people.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I anticipate that fully because I have felt viscerally in my own body what that feels like. I think of the concept of radical acceptance, right? It's acceptance isn't approval. Acceptance isn't I want this. Acceptance is this is. And that's what it means to say like it belongs. Well, it's here. So we need to look at it. And the opposition of like choosing an opposite side or deciding that what you see is the only right thing is the opposite of relationship, but it comes from a visceral fear of like, but I don't want that.
Yeah.
And like that's a tension that I feel like it takes a lot of capacity to hold because you're even in saying this is what is, you're expanding your capacity to be with something you don't like.
Yeah.
And like also holding the tension, like, I don't like it and it's here instead of I don't like it, it can't be here.
Exactly. And it's interesting that how rigid some of us have become as like fear increases systemically. I really do think that that fear is like kind of creating some like extreme polarization, calcification. And it's not that I don't have opinions. I very much have opinions. Um, but I think the work I do a lot of the time requires me to put my opinion aside to see the person in front of me. And that's a skill that I've had to develop. And I think once I saw it as a skill rather than like good person, bad person, like good people can hold space for both and like bad people can't. It's like, no, these are skills that I've developed over, you know, in 12 years of actively doing this work, but then studying the work even before that. Like it takes a long time and it's also a somatic capacity because like you said, all of that fear ignites in the body and we're sure the other person, person should be exiled or this topic should be off limits. And getting choked up because I'm like so fucking passionate about this topic.
Yeah.
And what the lack of skill around this has done in my family, in my community, like it's really heartbreaking. So I've had to see it as a skill so that I'm not constantly pissed at everyone and myself all the time.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because like then you'd be exiling the part of you like has opinions on the part of you that wants to hold space. Like
Yeah.
I had another conversation with a professor, and his episode will be in a couple weeks. But we discussed that like aspect of space and like how like I couldn't even I was writing out like my like little blurb for after naming the podcast, and I was like, oh good God, this requires like so much clarification. And I was like, you sometimes you have to say a thing, and like I think with it's so interesting that like on the internet we can say something, and because it feels like it's tailoring itself to the person who's seeing it, we can easily assume that it's wrong if it doesn't align with us, instead of assuming that it's not for us because it doesn't align with us. There's just this like sliver of like there's context, honey. Like we don't live in whatever social construct this person is saying this thing. So just move along. But it feels like no, I need to right the wrong. I need to correct this thing because it's not right in this context. And
Right.
there's just this blessed, sweet, defiant child in everyone, I think, who's doing that. It's just like, no, that's not right. And it's like, oh, I want to honor that. I want to honor that defiance because yes, baby, that's your toddler. That's your no. Like, fuck
Yeah.
no, that's
This
not for
isn't
me.
for me. Yeah.
Yes, it's so healthy developmentally for that stage of growth. It's just like it gets chaotic on the internet because it's like everyone assumes so much about each other and it's all out of context. And there's no human interaction that goes along with like, oh, I'm a person having a conversation with a person.
Yeah.
And if someone said that, oh, I don't feel like that resonates with me to you in person, you would be like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. Because it would be real relating.
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by this because this has always kind of been a thing on the internet, like because we're removed, we don't really know the other person, but it's been really wild since people have become like in relationship to AI in a way that is very extractive because AI is not a person.
Mhm.
Uh, it's been interesting to see people increase the way that they relate to me online in this way. Like
Mhm.
I feel like because people are using AI to extract information from, and
Mhm.
isn't a relationship. It gives you what you want every time. That I'm really curious how it is shaping our idea of relationship to be that. And so starting to relate to people as like, well, that's not the answer I wanted, or that's not the thing that I wanted. As where like even on the internet, people will almost like ask questions and like send very personal information to me as if I know them, as if it would be appropriate for me to respond on the internet in that way, like they would to AI.
Mhm.
And I'm really curious. I'm by curious, I mean terrified of what's happening because like the relating skills are getting really distorted by immediate gratification that like if you aren't what I wanted you to be, then you're wrong somehow, rather than relating to you as an individual person and we're not going to agree on everything.
Yeah, and what you're saying is very interesting because it came at, like, such an opportunistic time, right? We had that self-help movement of, like, what's in this relationship for me, right? So we in Spiral Dynamics, you're doing, like, is focus on me as a person, focus on the collective, focus on me, focus on the collective. And, like, if listeners, if you wanna go down a rabbit hole, Spiral Dynamics is a fun one.
Fine.
But, like, basically I feel like that entire, like, maybe 10 years or so prior, there was this major self-help movement where people were looking at their relationships going, "Wait, what is this relationship serving me? Is it high vibe?" It was a lot of, like, extracting from other spiritual practices to make its own thing, and it really aligns very well with an extractive relationship, because if you're looking at a relationship with just what you can get out of it, that's not relating.
Yeah.
And we have been told that it is, because that was like that whole movement where it's like, this is what you can do for you to be high vibe and get like all of your desires met, and like the vibrational thing is fascinating to me. But
Mhm.
I think that kind of primed us for like the having a robot that does that. It's like removed us from what it means to be with, like you've been talking about, the impossible.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I truly think that the space of both and is a space of nuance, the space of not knowing, and two things diametrically opposed existing together is where creativity, generativity, and evolution actually comes from.
Yeah.
Because those are solutions that show up in those spaces that can't be logicked into or created by a robot. It's only human creativity and the ability to be in that space that creates something new.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, which in a way feels like the like opposing poles, which is the same as everything belongs of both and like how do we grow our capacity to include more rather than exile what we don't like, understand, don't prefer. Um yeah, this topic brings up so much grief for me because it really seems like we as a culture relating in an extractive way, right? To the earth. I mean, it's so to women, to the earth, to indigenous cultures, like on and on and on. But it seems like we are, I think, at like a breaking point of seeing like we want to say, when I'm gonna be careful with my words, that like the evil elite are doing this to us. And that's true. They are. And also, we're doing it to each other, we're doing it to ourselves. And I think that's where because I get really, really angry whenever I feel like I can't do anything to stop what's happening systemically. And that's why I continually bring it back to like, where am I enacting this in my relationships? Where am I treating my partner like, well, what am I getting out of this instead of where is this a relationship? Or with clients or with social media, like continually asking myself, like, are we really in relationship or is this more of the same? Um, and it's hard. It's hard work. And yeah, I'm the thing that comes up for me honestly is just grief around it because I think so much of what we're longing for as a people is not we're not gonna find it where we're looking.
Yeah, and we might not collectively find it in our lifetime. I think that like this is like I think there's hope. I'm a hopeless optimist, but I think like when I consider like growth as a whole, like individually, and if you think of us collectively as also a body, like you feel an ache first, right? And the grief you're describing is like this, like something is wrong. And like that has to be felt.
Yeah.
And I think there are quite a few of us who are allowing that grief. for learning to be with what is. And I know that that's going to take a lot of expanding from that, of learning in that, because that is the hard work. Like the growth that's like the most challenging is not the most showy. It's not the loud confidence. It's not, I found the epiphany and the answer. Like we love that because it looks nice and it sounds nice and it feels nice and it's reassuring. But like the stuff that makes us grow is so specific to us. And it's usually relational. It's like,
Yeah.
but it's really hard to be with her when she's crying. Like for some reason that right makes my body react. Or like whatever it is for you, like there's a growth edge in there that like that ache, I think is what is calling each person forward. And I
Mhm.
think if in any kind of given space for that, it shows up because it longs to be healed.
Yeah.
Just like a body, right? And I think those of us who are talking about like creating space, we're definitely not the only ones. There's a lot of people who want this, who are doing this relational work. I don't think it's as loud, but I think it is more impactful, especially on a smaller community scale,
Yeah.
because it's how we're learning to interact with everything,
Yeah.
to be in a relationship with everything.
Yeah. I mean, it I'm just like kind of like as you're talking, kind of like getting pictures of my mind of like what life was like for me before I was really feeling. And I tend to be more of a feeling phobic person. I was a very sensitive like child, but I look back and see how people who were publicly grieving or were bringing their big emotions to me, like I had a disgust response, to be honest. And I was just like, get over it. Like we all have difficult stuff. Like pick yourself up and keep going. Like that's what I'm doing. And it was quite a humbling experience to get to a place of grief where I was unable to do that. And it was really difficult to see that as health because
Mm,
I thought health was continually outward, continual expansion, continual bettering of myself, which would mean I wouldn't feel difficult emotions. Right. This was like, this was my beginnings of self help. And it's been interesting to see like how the people around me have also changed since I started taking my pain seriously and taking like really feeling what's happened to me and actually in a way getting sober about my own grief and claiming it as mine. Like the pain that has happened to me isn't mine to collapse into forever, but it is mine to feel. And even though I thought that I wasn't sad or wasn't grieving, I can see the ways that my denial of those emotions and denial of that side of life was still like leaking out everywhere. It's not that it wasn't showing up in my life. It just wasn't showing up in a conscious way. It wasn't showing up in a way that was actually being tended to.
mm,
And so, I mean, so much of that has to do with how I was raised in my family system, but also like in our culture. I was so I was gonna say blessed. I'm like, does that sound so trite? Like I was blessed to listen to a podcast with Prentice Hemphill and Francis Weller this week. And they're both such beautiful grief workers. And I forget the quote exactly. I wrote it down. I wrote it down downstairs. But he was talking about like the dance of hopelessness.
mm,
And I previously was a kind of person that was like, there's always an answer. I can always figure it out. Like I can always get through it. There's always hope. And like honestly, the last 2 years, I just was confronted with things that were like truly hopeless. Like there was like only grief. There was only accepting what I didn't want to accept. And the amount of like protest and like, this is unacceptable to me. And I won't accept it because it's unacceptable to me.
mm.
And how stuck that has kept me, like ruminating on what I don't like instead of just like opening to it. And so, yeah, like as you're talking about this grief work, I think it sounds like whenever I would hear these conversations before, I would be like, yeah, 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 I get it. And not that I get it now, because I'm sure there's immense grief that will happen in my life that I will be unprecedented to me. And I hate that that's coming for us all, but it is. Um, but I was like, I'd rather be inspired than do this work. I'd rather be inspired and uplifted, as if I wouldn't be somehow uplifted by grieving the realities of things that have actually happened to me. And so I think like my own misconception about what grief would do for me. Not that it has to be something I get something from, but I mean, it changes you. You can't go through something where there's no hope and not be changed by it. So, yeah, I don't know that I have necessarily a point, but just in response to what you were saying, like, yeah, I'm like, and if I was hearing this 6 years ago, I would be having a totally different response to what you're saying.
Yeah. Same. Oh, yeah. I resonate with that so much. It's such a felt sense, and I have so many thoughts. I read recently The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller, and he talks about like the earliest days of a child's life where you're supposed to be met with space for your own emotional needs, but like how that often doesn't happen. And she goes throughout like the life of like an individual then learning how to feel. And her
Mm,
description of this like ability to have an identity if you were met with being able to feel, having that validated, I was like, oh, okay, so this is like true confidence, in my opinion, based on this and my experience, is believing that you are valid as a human being.
yeah,
Period.
you have a
Like
right to exist.
you have a right to exist. Like your experience is a valid experience because you're human. That is true identity. And are like you described yourself as being emotionally phobic. I think that's a reflection of our entire culture here.
Yeah,
It's just like emotion phobic. We're terrified of it. I think of like the most ostracized um mental health disorders, like borderline personality disorder.
mhm,
I think a huge part of that is the fear of being with complicated emotions.
yeah.
We don't know how to handle it as a
Or like a
societies.
relationship to borderline people, which I think is really interesting because everyone puts the burden specifically on people who have BPD and not why does no one in their life know how to relate to the challenges that are being presented.
Yeah, like why don't we know how to be with intense feelings?
Yeah.
What has been missing from their entire system in their life is an ability to be met with validation in that experience and held in what is challenging, which is truth, without being invalidated in that process. And that grief you're describing where you're like wanting to find an answer, wanting to stay in positivity, wanting to make meaning instead of allowing the grief and then having meaning arise because you were held in that. That is like the tension of growth that like we want to rescue our kids from, we want to rescue ourselves from, we want to rescue each other from because it feels so immense. We're afraid you won't make it.
Right.
And that like stepping in to like fix it. It's like I understand the heart of it because I've done that for myself and a lot of people. And it's a disservice
Yeah.
because it comes from like a lack of capacity in ourselves to be with the intensity. But it's also a disservice to ourselves and others to rescue them from what is like their right to struggle and then find their own meaning without the collapse because you're there in a relationship with. I think that it's just I think we need more of that.
Yeah. I
That's what I hope for like my career as a counselor. Like I want that's what I want to help people do is be in the space of that not knowing without jumping to a conclusion of any kind because the story is going to write itself as you are with it.
Yeah.
And that trust, building that trust in yourself, that your experience of it is valid without like having to make it be something, allowing it to be and then transform because you are capable of being there
Mhm.
together. We can be is is like the most life changing experience.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm just thinking about when someone tries to cheer me up when I'm in a bad mood, how obstinate I am. I'm like, now that I can like really feel my feelings, I'm like, I'm not asking to be cheered up. And in fact, I feel the selfishness of your bid to cheer me up. Like, and I can really double down about it now that I'm like being denied my reality for so long as a little person and told that I was too sensitive. And I grew up in a household that was like, if you're sad and you look sad and there are tears and your eyes are puffy, you need to go to your room until no one can see that anymore. And so there was
Mhm.
definitely a go deal with this alone and come back when you're presentable energy in my household. And so there wasn't a lot of like real comfort or witnessing. And like you're saying, like without our experience being mirrored, validated, affirmed as not like affirmed as the right experience to be having, but just affirmed that you are experiencing it at all. And it makes sense that you would be having that experience. Without that attunement, like you said, like a self doesn't really develop. And I can see over the last couple years, like truly like, probably too obstinate, to be quite honest, like, holding on to my, like, pain because I personally think it was a season of acknowledging and validating, like, this actually isn't okay with me, and this person actually was unkind to me, and, like, actually really, really protecting the part of myself that had been okay being mistreated or okay with devastating losses in my life.
Um,
And I'm getting to a place of more balance now, but there was a protection of like my pain fucking matters. And I will talk about it and I will shout it from the rooftops if I fucking want to. And not everyone has to stick around for that. You know, we all have phases in our healing. But for me, being able to bring my rage out of freeze, being able to then feel the grief that was underneath all the rage of the ways that I was violated, the ways that I was mistreated, and the ways also that I abandoned myself and was allowing myself to stay in things that were harming me, like that needed a season of almost like utter validation where it was like, you are allowed to be feeling this. You are allowed to be saying this. And I'm not going to say I didn't cause any trouble with it. I certainly did. But I'm glad I did because it was 34 years pent up rage and grief and sadness being gaslit.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, like, finally becoming real to me that though, like, oh, that was real. That, like, that is a real experience was like a reparenting of all of the young ones that were like, maybe it wasn't a big deal. Maybe that didn't really happen. My feelings don't matter. And also, I don't know how you would somatically feel this in your body as a little person, but I remember like where I would just be getting berated, right? I grew up in an abusive situation and I remember this ability to like pull all of my attention to the back of my neck. And instead of crying, I would imagine my tears like being pulled into my brainstem. I now know. And the area of freeze that would come over my entire body, where my face would just go flat, my body would just empty out. And I would just kind of imagine all that abuse just like running through my body into the ground. And like, what a brilliant strategy for a little person's body
oh yeah,
to have no reaction. Oh, I'm being mistreated. I don't even notice. But eventually, if we want to have a self, if we want to become whole, if we want to honestly be able to protect ourselves, which was my issue of like, if I can't feel my pain, I can't protect myself from what's harming me because I don't know what's
yeah,
happening if I can't feel it. And
yeah,
so that, I mean, I think I'm in my mind, I was transitioning from like, not just is feeling good, but without it, we are likely to put ourselves in situations where we cannot protect ourselves or we cannot advocate for ourselves or we don't really know what's actually going on with us because we're mistaking a threat response, which is like fawning or freezing for a lot of us, that combination.
Yeah.
Whenever you're stuck there, you don't know what you feel. You just know
Yeah.
you feel kind of like off. And later you're like, wait, was that like, why do I feel so weird? Why am I suddenly having chronic illness? Like, why is the body shutting down? It's like, oh, okay, your body's trying to speak to you because nothing else has been working. And I'm on a tangent now. I'm on a tangent now. But yeah, I really think that for me, without this process of almost like extreme validation, I would not have gotten to a place where I can actually protect myself, where I was like outsourcing that from other people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that didn't feel like a tangent at all to me. That felt completely relevant. Right. The the picture of your like inner self being protected by your adult self, just like no, that did hurt. And I feel that like visceral.
Yeah.
Like that feels so like okay, there's a song by Dashboard. Vindicated, I am selfish. That is what comes to mind. Is like this inner kid that's just angsty, screaming, like vindicated, like I believe me, if
Yeah.
no one else does. And that is like that is the energy of what you're describing. Not that like your adult self is also there, right? But you're holding space, or you've been holding space for this part of you that was never vindicated and never validated, and saying like, no, here, have the space. You were right. It sucks. You felt it. It was terrible.
Yeah.
That was your experience, and that is completely valid. Like that depth of feeling needs a container. And you
Mhm.
gave it that container to be like, here, express yourself. You never got to. I'll see you. I'll
Yeah.
believe you.
This is the power of like really great containers being held by practitioners because not everyone in our life will be able to do that for us. And in fact, usually they won't in our culture. And having someone who is so stable inside themselves and has met those parts of themselves, who's not going to be offended, have a blowback, or have like a recapitulation of what's already happened, who can be like really meet that energy. If it's rage, if it's grief, if it's this, I feel chronically victimized, or this grief is never ending. So much of like the emotional energy just wants a place to be witnessed and met. And it becomes something else once it's met, which is so fascinating. You mentioned EPD, and I think a lot of highly stigmatized pathologies, EPD being a primary stigmatized pathology, I think they increase in severity. This is my personal opinion, to the extent that there has not been adequate meeting of what is arising in the person. And
Yeah.
so the more we, which I love internal family systems and constellation work in my
Mm.
practice. And the more that something is not allowed in the family system, the more it often gets projected onto one person or the identified patient in a family system. And that person's body or emotions or something about them gets so loud because everyone's projecting what's not allowed in their own body onto that person. And that person's body will inflame and cry out. And it's often people who get diagnosed as bipolar or BPD or who have chronic illness that are manifesting the energetic shadow material of the entire family. And they're crying out often on the behalf of generations of suppression. And so it's really curious to me whenever someone comes in my practice who has had diagnoses or is working with a therapist with their diagnoses. And also, I see a sense of stability inside of them. In the through line is there's a self that never got to be validated, that what their pain is real, that their brilliance is real. And once that energy starts to become conscious and met by someone and allowed, which is again why like everything belongs. Because if we just pathologize and shun these parts of people or whole people, we are never going to get the medicine of what happens once that energy is met.
Yeah.
What gift does that become once that energy is met and that person's body relaxes? That's alchemy. There's something really powerful there. And the more we exile, the less likely we're going to get that medicine.
Mm, yeah. Oh, yeah. And you and I have spoken about this before, but like the conditions that are needed for thriving weren't met. And so like that like the condition of stability. And I really love the term of being met because I think of it this in somatic terms. I think you and Jamie have talked about this before, but like I think of like a fist meeting a palm, like in a fighting stance, but not an angry one, but rather like, ooh, like I can bring all of my intensity and you are not shaken. In fact, you meet me right here. You're not pushing me over. I'm not able to push you over. I'm met.
Yes.
And that like that some people feel like myself are born with intensity. And that's like there's a whole um biopsychosocial, like there's a lot of factors there. But like the emotional intensity as a biological risk factor for disorder or just a beautiful part of existence is the yes, creativity, the ability to experience things more intensely. Like those are beautiful aspects when supported with the right conditions, right? That intensity, if not met, feels like chaos
Yeah.
to the person themselves and to other people because it doesn't have a place to go that feels safe.
Right.
So it just it gets stuck, it gets projected upon. It's it feels like there's nowhere to go. And like you're describing when someone starts to be met, and this is true from my own experience when I began working with practitioners where I was able to feel like, oh, this person isn't going to rescue me, but they're also really unfazed by everything I'm saying and feeling
Mm.
because they don't need me to be better. They don't need me to be fixed. They don't need me to hold this myself. They trust me to hold it myself. It's just like it was an entirely new way of relating that was like, oh, someone can be with me. So then I could learn how to be with myself.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that I think is the profundity, a funny word, I like that word, of both and of everything belongs because it makes space for all of the nuance of like the root system of the intense emotional experience.
Yeah. Yeah. The feeling of like where I used to hire my practitioners to solve things for me, like now when I sense that energy, like I run so fast. Because it like and I used to be a practitioner like this, like, I'm like, "Come to me with problems, we will figure it out." And that was also, mind you, the kind of coaching that I was doing at that time. I started coaching really young, so it was, like, very, like, "Tell me your goals. What is hindering you from your goals? We will systematically figure it out." There's a place for that, like, I love tapping into that when it's needed, but the more I was doing that work and the more also I was doing other trainings, I was seeing how like so much of what I was being trained in was teaching me to help people bypass what their experience was to be better somehow.
And
And inevitably, what was being bypassed in 6 months, they're hiring me again because they're like, hey, this thing is now showing up over here, right? It's kind of like the whack-a-mole. You hit it and then it pops it over there. And I feel like the more I mean, self-help was my drug of choice, but like it's religion, but we all have the ways that we're trying to cope with the difficulty and that the insanity that is being a person. For some reason, we are all like pretending it's not absolutely insane. Like,
yeah,
and I,
we are, but
I'm like, slowly, I'm not pretending anymore, but like, I think that this is often also identified patient, truth teller, the neurodivergent folks, that people who are slightly different eventually become the truth teller, because it's like, why are we all pretending that everyone's okay when clearly we're not? Like, and it's the feeling of lie under
Mm.
that I find so many of my clients who are usually very highly sensitive people, whatever, some of them have diagnoses of different kinds. Some are just like, these people feel, these people care, these people sense incongruent. And the ways of coping with that incongruence are just not working anymore. And I think honestly, all coping is like a kind of addiction. Like some of the best times in my life when I look back were honestly me just avoiding what was actually happening for me. And but also rightfully so, because no one in my life could meet what was actually happening in my experience.
Yeah, you didn't have capacity for it at that point.
Yeah. And I had a great time.
Yeah.
Also, I'm like here for having a great time, and I'm here for sometimes putting things aside to like not let our whole world be difficulty. I think that's
Mhm.
really part of the conditions that you mentioned are creating stable enough, mundane enough, beautiful enough like resources to
Um,
be able. And I think that that's really what is lacking, is if the conditions weren't there for life, if the conditions weren't there for healthy development, it's likely that we don't know how to create those conditions. And I really felt like it was so all or nothing, which is like how it is whenever you're in a threat response. But either like it was only good all of the time, and like positivity, high vibration, meditate on what I want, write the story of what I want my life to be. And I would also do it. And that's what was so addicting about it, is like I could write the story and it would happen the way I wrote it. And it gave me some sort of omnipotence that was deeply humble. I should have had. Like when I started opening to actually it was on a mushroom journey, I think the beginning of this. I did these mushrooms called hillbilly. It's a strain out of Arkansas, and I did it with a group of my friends, and it was hillbilly. Like that's the only way I know how to describe these mushrooms. Is it was like it took the fixation, which is like how I describe like Enneagram or ego fixation, like whatever kind of number on the Enneagram that you settle at, it basically just turns the value way up on the fixation. And so everyone started acting out their ego in these like really dramatic, ridiculous ways, in a way that's like comedy, to be quite
yeah.
honest. And eventually, I'm like worried about everyone else and like, what's my partner doing? And is everyone okay? And like, just like so outward oriented, so like not focused on my experience at all, really trying to manage fucking everything.
Um,
And I sat down, which is a miracle I even was able to sit down, because I'm certainly doing too much. Like no one ever said she didn't do enough. Let's just say that. Like I'm doing too much. So I sit down and I see the whole room beaded. Everything is beaded like indigenous beading.
um,
And I hear what I can only imagine is God say, "Did you do that?" And I was like, "No." It, I mean, it was like, right, lay down.
no, no.
And I just kind of like sat in this energy of how much over responsibility I was taking for everything, and how I felt like everything was mine to fix and everything was mine to do. And the story of my life was mine to write. And like, I'm now casting everyone in the story of my life, apparently, because I think I know how it's supposed to go for me and everyone around me. And it was like this, like, oh my God, like I had no idea the level of control that all of my like positivity and self-help and achievement rested upon. And it was truly delusional. Like and it began this like unraveling for me of like what happens when I let go of control and stop trying to script, like you said, trying to create the meaning before I even felt the experience.
Oh,
Yeah. And
that.
so it's been
Can we
really
skip the
helpful.
feeling and get to the meaning? Like, I'd rather
I've
not
already
feel.
written it.
Let's just go to the, go, yeah, let's go to go to the epiphany at the end.
Yeah, I'm like, I've already figured out what it's going to mean for me, and I've already written the ending of the story, and now everything just needs to live into that. And I'm like, this is actually insane. You have a control issue. It's over responsibility. You're terrified of negative feelings and difficult feelings. You're terrified to lose control of your reality. And I was rightfully so, because when I stopped doing
Yeah.
that, it felt like shit for a
Yeah.
while. I felt like rightfully so, I was doing that. And we all
Mhm.
have our own flavors of it, because if we don't have the condition to feel and to be attuned to, like, what other choice do we have but to control in our unique ways of controlling and not feeling? And so, yeah, I'm like, I don't recommend stopping controlling everything until you've created the condition,
Um,
because that is what an ego death is. It's like, right? Like, your ego is all of the structures that you've created for safety. And an ego death is suddenly when they all stop working.
I think immediately comes to mind like the process of like deconstructing from a faith system or like a high control religious environment or even a high control family system. Like when that breaks for you,
Oh
like
my
whatever
God.
that moment is for you, I've never felt like I jumped off like a cliff. Like your entire the floor goes out from under you, your stomach is in your throat, like for days, months, years. It's like
Yeah.
it is an ego death of epic proportions, and that's what that is. It's like, but I saw it. I knew something. I had this. I have it. Like you said, I wrote it. I mean, it all made sense. It was
Yeah.
orderly. I could take every experience and put it in this container and make it make sense within this system. And like I think of that epic, horrifying experience of falling or the ego death is a necessary piece to be able to have an identity that's beyond just the thing that you made sense of your life with, like the fixation or any system can't be used properly if we are just using that thing to hold the entire system of our life together. Not,
Mhm.
you can. It's fine. Again, like a flavor of coping. Great.
Yeah.
I love that
It'll
for
work
you.
as long as it works. And then good luck when it
Exactly.
stops.
We're here for you. And it's
Yeah. And it's so humbling to go through something like that where you think you've figured it out or you think that you have an answer that other people don't have. Like, and I thought I was done going through that. And then life hands
keeps
me
doing that.
myself on a platter once more. And I'm like, I think that there has to be something to create a sense of surrender and
Mhm.
humility. And I mean, again, I I don't think it's easy to go through any of that without conditions. I think people truly it's a crisis.
Yeah.
It is a crisis moment for people. Like, whenever you left the church, I'm curious if it felt like a crisis for you or if that's what you were referring to.
Yeah.
But I think also, like, divorce, coming out, like, big threshold initiations. Um, they're an ego death, but they're a crisis. Was that true in your experience?
Yeah, yeah, it is, and it's like with some of these rites of passage, there's communities around to like explain that for you. When I was leaving the church or coming out of that system, like my siblings and I were talking about it, but like otherwise, there was no one recognizing how terrifying that was.
Yeah.
It was just like it was. I'm so grateful I had my siblings in that process. And like outside of us, there was very little that was able to hold space because the stuff that I saw was just like a next leap to like an extreme version of atheism, and it didn't resonate for me. But I was like, but that's not what this is. This is something different. This feels like dying, and it's in its crisis. It's like how do I walk? Like, you ever take a nap in the middle of the day and you wake up and you're like, when am I? Like,
I don't like to nap for that reason because I hate that feeling so much. You, like, wake up, you're like, what day is it? What time is it? Who am I? Like, yeah.
It's either really good for me or really bad.
You're a
And
Taurus also. I could see you really enjoying a midday nap.
it can be wonderful if I wake up and then I'm like, I'm a new person and I'm a little high off of my nap. But there have been many experiences in my life where it can be quite disorienting. And it's that feeling. But like instead of it being when you sleep, it's like the moment you wake up, you like you kind of knew something had happened and then it all rushes back to you that you
Mhm.
don't have a place to land. And that happens with like a lot of grief, right? Like you're in sleep, perhaps if you're not dreaming about it, you like forget about it for a few seconds after you wake up. You go to pee or brush your teeth and then it hits you again. You're like, oh, this is the reality that I'm in right now.
Yeah.
And having that is a crisis. Like having someone to hold you in that space, I think is so necessary because unless we've had those conditions like set up, we don't have those conditions. So we don't know what to do with that. I think you wrote recently about like grandmother energy. I think that's what we need
Yeah.
stability, not an answer.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
earth, not loud confidence. Like we need
Yeah.
the wind and the soil and air to hold the intensity of that experience, not a one size fits all version of here's who you are now. Here's steps of how to. I mean, I love the information. I love the steps. It just that's not how my brain works or my body. So the space that I hold and have had held for me is more thematic and more like, oh, that is so hard.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. And you're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's wild how simple it is, but how actually like difficult it is in our bodies to like really soften and widen into that. You mentioned
Yeah.
the grandmother energy, and I've been really grateful to find a shamanic mentor who's also a therapist in my city who's 81 and just like been practicing shamanism for over 30 years, has been a therapist since she was in her 20s and like still sees clients, like just such a lovely human. And she's impossible to find online. People always ask, how do I get a hold of her? You can't and you won't. Like she's not online. She doesn't have Facebook. She doesn't have a business card or a website. But being around her, right? Like she supported me through 2 breakups and has maintained like good relation with my ex despite there not being like easy relationship between us. And I've just watched her be able to hold so many realities with so much capacity. And it's like there's something to someone who's seen so much. Like I've seen her go and help people prepare for death, like right, help people's bodies prepare. But like that's what I think of whenever I think of who I want to become. And I feel very lucky to have one person like this. And I also have like an auntie who's similar, like an adopted auntie who's lives really close by. Her name's Abby, and she's was a professor. And just is like a lovely human. She's in her 60s, but that like uh 80-year-old grandmother elder is definitely not something I experienced from my grandmothers. And mind you, my dad has been married 5 times. So I had a lot of opportunities. Okay. I've had a
A lot of
lot of
grandmas.
opportunities for great nurturing grandmothers. And my grandmas were very sweet people. One was Rose would come back from her grave and say, I was not a sweet person. Rose was totally a bitch. Okay. But she had 7 Virgo placements. She was so critical, so mean, but hilarious. Like flashes her boobs at Easter, kind of a grandma. So like I certainly have like I'm like, I don't want to leave Grandma Rose out because that's pretty epic, but it's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about grandmother energy. And what to say about Karen, the shaman grandmother, is that it is so nice to watch someone who moves through their life with a lot of humility, who continues to serve, who continues to widen their capacity, and also like a grandma who sees like politics in a good way, according to me, and who agrees with me in a lot of ways. Like it's just being around someone like that has brought up grief for how long most of us are looking for even a reference point for grandmother energy of like who who would make soup, like who would just touch your head when you're crying. I had a session with her once and she had me on a table and she sung a lullaby to me while holding my head. And I've never experienced anything like that. I was like, and it was something about it coming from an older woman. And it resonated with something in me that was like ancient, that remembered what it was like with the grandmothers saying to the younger people, the younger women, to the babies, that I was like, we really have forgotten something. And
Oh,
it's hard to find our way back because of what's happened.
oh, I lost your sound.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back now.
Okay. I was just thinking about what happened, through the Middle Ages to those of us who are indigenous to Europe, like what's happened to all of our traditions, to our grandmothers, like our ancient grandmothers, like there's really deep wounds there. And it's also something that a lot of us, like we reference the witch hunts almost like as this novel thing without realizing what it's severed us from.
Yeah.
And like I I think about those women at the edges of the village who would have had medicine and witness for those who would have been deemed crazy and could have initiated them into being the seers in the community.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's when there's no place for something, it gets scapegoated. When
Exactly.
there's no belonging for a feeling or a way of being, then it is ostracized. And grandmothers were the ones, the elders, who were saying like, "Here's where you belong. Here's where
Yeah.
you fit. Look at your skills. You're good at this. We can
Exactly.
cultivate this. Here's what's needed to cultivate this gift and skill."
Yeah. Yeah. Makes me think about all the people, the sensitive folks who come through like my work and your work and who are seeking healing are often the people who are deeply feeling, who don't have a place for their feelings, who don't have a place for what they see, who no one can hear the insights they're having. Like those people, those of us, I'll say us, because I do think you and I are those people as well. Like there's something really needed about what we bring. And I think our culture is getting there, but we do have to continue to grow our skill and meeting when none of us really want to see. I'll speak for myself. Like, I didn't want to see the realities like this. It's much worse than I hoped it would be. I was so naive. So naive.
Yeah. Yeah. The ability to hold it all, I think, is like I think survival depends on grandmother energy, not just because of the calm confidence of believing in belonging and helping people find their place, but also because there's joy and silliness that is in that energy that's just like still playful because it knows that's a necessary aspect of existence that's not frivolous, not secondary. It's life-giving, and that
Mm.
that belongs amidst the intensity of joy and despair and grief is humor at the foolishness of all of it, right? Because the fool is also belongs. The trickster also belongs.
Fool is the
The
sage.
what?
The fool is the sage. Like the
Yeah,
fool is the only one who can speak the truth to the king.
yeah,
The only one, and they do it with a wink. And everyone thinks that the fool doesn't know what's going on. And that's what I love about full energy. And I do think grandmothers get to have a little bit of that. Like they're cheeky.
Mhm. Yeah. Cheeky is the best way to put it. It's just like this, like an earned place of, I can say that.
Yeah.
Like,
And
I
that's
can
even
speak my
fun.
mind. Yeah.
They really don't. And I'm like, what a gift. I really pray for my own initiation into elderhood because the deconstructing of patriarchal ideas of being a femme, of being someone socialized as a girl, what we're supposed to become and maintain. And I think that there's a really big grief for a lot of women through midlife of like losing place instead of initiation into a place.
Yeah. Well, when you said the loss of a grandmother, it's like, yeah, because we don't know who to look to become. Like,
Right.
yeah, I know that, like, there's conversation about, like, in the queer community, like, we lost an entire generation of mentors, right?
Yeah.
I think that similar has been done in women, except it's not an external death, although in some cases it is. But a lot of it is just, like, because of the internalized patriarchal nature of, like, women collapsing on themselves, not believing their own experience, not believing their existence is as valid as other people's. There is a loss of the energy that we need. And so, like, who do I look to become?
Yeah.
We
Exactly.
need that. I long for that. The people that I know older than me who have that energy, I'm like, "Ah, we need you." Like, because I want to become you. Not you, but my own version of whatever that is.
Exactly. I love that the Karen I know, the shaman Karen, is so not a Karen in the stereotypical use of the word, but to use that word because I think everyone knows what that means. I feel like whenever I was waitressing, a long time ago, the people who were the most unkind to me were the Karen energy. I mean, cruel, really, really cruel. And I used to have such a grudge against that energy, but now I'm really like I'm beginning to see signs of aging, right? Like I'm like at the beginning of like, oh, things are changing, but like I haven't really lost enough youthfulness to have there be consequences in my ability to have opportunity. Like there's still youthful privilege in my life. But I think as women and femmes age, like there's such, again, speaking of like a grief, like where does this grief go of like everything I was told I was going to get by being thin or beautiful or, whatever the standard was, when it doesn't pay out, you're going to see rage. And
Yeah.
a lot of the time it's younger women who pay instead of directing that rage adequately. And I don't say it as a judgment because I think that it's a horrific thing that's been done to women and femmes in this culture. And rightfully so, you're pissed. Rightfully so, because where our grandmothers to initiate us into what we're becoming. And also to say like all that is actually bullshit, honestly. So, I mean, like, there is something to, like and I'm seeing people start to thank goodness, like, millennials are hitting perimenopause and starting to, like, have open conversations about these things because 'cause I'm, like, looking down that
Yes.
direction, like, "Oh, that's coming soon," and I'm glad that these things are being destigmatized, but for our mothers and their mothers, like, who was initiating them? Who was validating that they weren't crazy, that they didn't need electroshock therapy, that they didn't have to be put away? I mean, these are very recent atrocities.
Yeah.
And I have my own feelings about how I've been treated by the older women. And I also like, no wonder because there was no
Yeah.
room for their grief. There was no room for their aging or for their rage at the patriarchal system. And I think you've mentioned something about being met, and I wanted to touch on that because I think to me that being met, with your hands, and you mentioned Jamie, who's my partner for those listening, that feeling of being met indicates like safety in the body. It indicates like the whole body will relax when you're met physically, like push against someone's hands and let them like do some restraint, and it like there's no ability. Did you lose me?
I'll ask you for just a sec.
Okay. When there's no, I think about women under the patriarchy not able to push against without being punished. And what ends up
Mhm.
happening is we push down, we punch down, and then we end up harming those who have a less systemic power, which the most obvious example of that is children.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, "Dude, this is how these things get reinforced." And I'm like, this to me, this is why the necessity of knowing how to feel, knowing how to harness our rage and our grief is so important, because when it's not met, it will leak onto those that we think we have more power over, because we won't be punished for that. Women pushing back against men, there's likely going to be consequences. So what happens, it comes out against other women, against people of color. If you're a white person like you and I, like there's all these ways that it like leaks out, and it all makes sense, but it's incompetence with what's happening in our bodies that has to be denied and suppressed. So I'm like, this is actually why I'm so passionate about this, because I think the origin of it all is child abuse, and we can't stop child abuse unless we are competent with our own energies.
Yeah. With our own ability to feel. It's
Exactly.
it's just it's passed on. It's a devastating grief that until it's felt, it continues. And to much to the devastation of the people doing it as well. It's
Exactly.
a lot of people don't know how to stop that and are trying. But
Yeah.
there's just very little knowledge, like you said, very little competence of understanding what is happening when we are acting like that and what is going on, because there is harm done to us that doesn't have a place to go. It does, but it's a little scary when it goes in the direction that it's supposed to,
Yeah.
because there are consequences that is like, I think of another like out down versus up in terms of like wealth, right? Like if there's like a distraction in politics being polar opposite, with a lot of people who both have money that keep everyone else distracted fighting for them, when everyone down here is actually like could link arms and go right, it go up. It's just like there's this like this misunderstanding of where the harm is coming from, that
Mm.
we don't know what to do with it, and that I really think that starts so young,
Yeah. With
by like,
resentment.
yeah, and like as I'm a mom, I'm guilty of this. Like I didn't know how to handle that with my daughter. Like no one held me.
How could you?
I didn't know. And that's like that's a thing to grieve. And it's not an easy thing to grieve, and it's not easy work then, knowing that I did this. Okay, now how do I work to heal this, repair this, because this is mine. That's
Yeah.
that's a lot to hold.
So
That
much.
I have a lot of grace and understanding for people who don't are ready to look at that.
Absolutely. And it's so, it's easy to go on a podcast and talk about all these things theoretically, but it's such a different thing to like live any of it. It's, we are here for what, like an hour or 90 minutes, and it can sound really like, and we know exactly how to do this. And here's the problem and here's the solution. But it's so much messier than that. And it's so like, so human. It's so
Yeah.
human. Like I certainly like I'm in conflict with multiple people, like I'm like it's that is the way of life, but also like can I hold my own dignity? Can I hold everyone in their dignity? Can I continue to own the areas where I perpetuate what was done to me? Like that really is our only option.
Yeah, repair. I
Actually,
I did this wrong. I'm really sorry. I'm trying.
yeah, exactly. And being able to offer ourselves and other people compassion, which is so different than, again, like validating what was done. Like, I think accountability is real, right? Like, if we've hurt our partner or child or someone in our life, like there are things we have to do to make that right. And it can't take away like the harm that was caused. But I do think it's so, at least in my family system, like so much would change if the harm was just acknowledged.
Yeah, before we go off on an entire other, because I'm thinking like the United States of America specifically, like, like when you don't acknowledge harm that you've done, that was done at the beginning. If you don't acknowledge damage, it continues, and
Exactly.
it's another system that we have to acknowledge it. And there's this idea that, well, we can't look at that. We don't need to look at that. That's in the past. It's like, but no one ever made that right.
Yeah.
And it's still happening because no one ever made it right. It's it hasn't been felt. And people don't want platitudes or like fixed changes or like corporate whatever. They want to be felt
Yeah.
and known and connected with. That's human. And I think that's what repair is with ourselves and with other people is feeling like you did for your inner child. Like this was shit. This felt bad.
Yeah.
And holding that for ourselves, for other people. As a nation, we did this.
Yeah.
It was hurtful to you.
Mm.
But that takes building capacity to be within each part of ourselves that's been harmful, harmed,
Yeah.
so on. And that's a lot of emotional capacity for like an emotion phobic culture.
And shame phobic. And this is why so much of my work has centered on shame, because to
Mhm.
be able to acknowledge the ways that we too have harmed, like not only have I been harmed, I also have harmed. And sometimes that's active. We tend to focus on active harm in our culture, but also there's neglect, there's enabling harm, there's looking the other way. And I think in my healing over the last couple of years, doing somatic work specifically, it was more so grieving the things that I've done and growing capacity for seeing ways that I perpetuated the same things that were done to me that were the hardest things to grieve. And this is true for like PTSD, uh, war veterans. It's very often not the things that they witnessed, but the things that they did that were the things that were the most distressing. And so it's interesting to me, like we're all pretending none of this exists, but we're all holding on to the grudges and ways that we've been hurt. Right. I think it's literally is all of us. It's all of us. And so much, so much opens through feeling. So many opinions on this topic, but I think that the label of even like abuser, for example, like I've experienced being on the receiving end of abusive language recently from someone in my life. And there's like a really firm boundary with myself and this person right now. And I don't consider this person to be an abuser. And I think we are really struggling with knowing how to take accountability for our own behavior, because we think if we admit that this was abusive, that we are an abusive person. And I think that like this gap is going to only grow, because how can anyone take responsibility and be accountable for what they're doing if they're shunned and shamed before they get the opportunity to own what they did? It's very
Yeah.
delicate, and I don't want to say that people aren't abusers, because I've been abused. So this person is doing something abusive. They're not abusing me because I won't let them. Like and which is a boundary capacity that I've had to grow, because I used to let myself be abused because I didn't have the skill to be like, you cannot talk to me this way. We are not doing this, which is again, cycles of abuse continue. But now when I have that capacity, I'm like, I don't participate in abusive dialogue. We're not doing this. We're just not doing this. I don't think you're an abuser, but this actually is what abuse is. and I don't do
Mhm.
this. And I think somehow growing in the capacity for differentiating a person in their totality as something horrible and a thing that they've done or have learned to cope by being harmful or abuse. This is a hard conversation to have, but it's helped me stop being all or nothing with people because a lot of people are doing abusive things. Most people have experienced abuse. So is everyone an abuser? And again, there's a spectrum, there's a scale. I know that things on the far end of the scale deserve to be named as what they are. But in instances where we want to cast someone out, I I'm really curious about uncoupling the behavior from the totality of who a person is.
Yeah, and I think what you're describing is nuance and belonging and being with, like, the what someone is doing right now is not all of who they are, and when you sit with a person, you can see that, or I can see that, I know you can see that. It's like, when you're being with a human as a human, you're getting more than one piece, right?
Yeah.
And the the shame or feeling of fear that comes from, like, someone doing something that's not acceptable, the visceral response of, like, a cancellation or whatever of that person is in the fear of, like, a fear of potentially that's a part of us, and we're canceling that. And so we're like, "I can't look at that in me. I can't look at that in you. That's bad." And, like, maybe it is a problem, but, like, if we're
Yeah.
not gonna look at it with nuance there, there's sure as hell no way we're gonna be able to look at what we're doing that's similar in ourselves because we've made no space for it.
Which is actually becomes more dangerous, which is like, I think people could potentially hear this of like, don't be clear about what's abusive. And I mean it the exact opposite of be very clear about what's abusive and what is
Yeah.
you're not going to tolerate. And then stop
Yeah.
tolerating it if you have those skills. Because doing that and like ending it as it's happening, like people don't treat me this way, I don't engage in this way is so much cleaner than allowing it to continue while shaming that person over and over and over again and inevitably doing to them than what they're doing to you. It's like this mimetic conflict
Yeah.
that's happening. And I could rant about this forever because I'm a systems thinker for better and for worse. And like once you see it start to mimic itself, that we become the thing that we think that we're not through seeing it in everyone else. It's like, oh my God, it's it's quite
Yeah.
exhausting, but it's cool.
Yeah. It's like, it's like very I have a lot of grace and compassion for it, the self and the younger version of me and probably the parts of me that are still here that think that I should do the opposite of what was harmful, what I think is harmful,
Yeah,
because that's just another step of, like, trying to avoid looking at the actual thing. Whereas, like, if I'm able to pause and be with it, there's always a third way.
yeah,
There's always another way, and what you're describing of, like, not allowing the abuse is just a way of saying, like, "Oh, hey, I'm not gonna communicate this way. Can we communicate this way? Like, this is how I'm willing to communicate with you. These are the terms of which we can continue relating."
yeah,
And it's not a, like, "You're bad," because that, like, that ends any kind of connection or growth
yeah,
or opportunity for anything, which, you know, if you have to leave, leave. But, like, in a lot of scenarios, like, the naming a person, a thing as an identity, like, naming their identity, what you think they are, is really unproductive because it cuts off connection. Whereas what you're describing is saying, like, "Oh, I would like to speak more, like, plainly. Can we stick to naming what is actually happening? Can we stick to naming facts right now so that we can be clear? Because I wanna understand, and I know you do too. Like, let's be really clear." about where we are right now and leave the judgment out of it
Yeah.
so that we can be productive here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think once we go to character assassination, we're really not having productive anything
Yeah.
because
We're in our field.
everyone's defensive at that point. It's like, oh, if we're gonna escalate, we're gonna escalate, right? Like we all have been there in our own way. And I think what you're describing, I just want to name for anyone listening, like these are things that are skill building. Like I described my own freeze and fawn as a child of like hollowing out and just like really becoming numb. And
Yeah.
being in that state wasn't a choice for most of my life, which meant that when I was encountering abuse, because that was the template for or the imprint, if you will, for what I would do in abuse, it took me a very long time to be able to be present with myself, feel the no I had, identify that this wasn't okay, say something. These are capacities that have to grow over time.
Yeah.
And it isn't as easy as just like, this is abusive. I won't participate. Let's talk like this.
Yeah, no way.
Right.
Everyone would do it if it was a 5-step TikTok process.
Right.
That's not what this is. That's years of emotional labor to expand gently your capacity to like you said, be with your no in a space you feel safe to do so. Because
Exactly.
that's how that grows.
Yeah. And my fear always with these, like with putting anything out on the internet, always is that even though these conversations allow for a lot of nuance, they still can come off like, oh, these two people who are experts in this talking about all the ways that they figured it out. And like, one, this is my special interest. I know a lot about topics that I'm not masterful at in my life. And I think that that's really worth saying is like, I know a lot about this. I've studied this extensively from multiple different, like, I guess, avenues in. And I feel like I have a really thorough understanding. That understanding does not always correlate to praxis or doing it well. It is like, it is my aim. And so I think if anyone's listening, like anything I share ever, it's almost like it's an aim for what I'm aiming for in my life. And what I know about something that I hope to orient my life around, not, and I figured it all out and now I do it perfectly. Like, it's just so easy to hear anyone with a microphone in a platform and assume, like, oh, well, they figured it out. Or, which always, I'm speaking in extremes because I'm salty, but like, people sitting in my community and being like, oh, well, you said here this thing. And then that doesn't allow room for all the ways that I'll inevitably get it wrong. And so just so everyone knows, like, I think anyone ever on a podcast talking about like literally anything, um, they're probably sharing their expertise in an area and it doesn't mean that they figured it all out. We all need to remember that more because it can add shame. It could add self-blame to think that, oh, everyone's figuring this out and I screamed at my kid this morning and I'm a bad person, right? Like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
not the
Yeah.
intention.
Yeah, absolutely not. And thank you for naming that because that's critical. I hear a lot in like studying like that people are like growing to be experts or they want to be experts in this area. Really am wary of that word because of like being raised in high control space. I don't know anything about you listeners. This is a deep respect for you. And I know Madison does too. And you know best for your life. We know best for ours. These conversations are meant to be expansive and to be seen as like an opportunity to see things in a new way, to see yourself with more grace and compassion, because that is our practice. Currently. And like we walk with deep humility, with find interesting information, understanding from our experiences, which are valid, yours, which is different, is just as valid. You should only take from this what feels resonant for you right now.
Yeah.
and leave the rest. Come back to it later or don't, or say fuck up,
Yeah.
leave, and we'll be proud of you. It's like there's room for all of that here. I always want there to be room for all of that here because all of that is part of your journey as well as ours.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the amount of caveats, like caveat, caveat, caveat. It's important.
We'll get it wrong. It's okay. We're
Yeah.
here for that too. We're here to learn.
Yeah. Like I'm always open for the Instagram DM, which whether or not I'm open, they always come.
That's happening.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining today, Matt. Really appreciate your time.
This was so fun. These are all topics that I could and did go on and on and on about. So I appreciate you having me on to talk about something that I think both of us care a lot about.
Absolutely. Thank you.